I definitely believe that I have experienced pay discrimination on the basis of my race. But the tricky thing is that there's a lack of transparency around pay and around other contractual arrangements, which may make it hard to explain or to prove to someone who hasn't experienced this discrimination. But for many Pacific and for many Māori and minority communities, it's an instinctual feeling that we have that we're being taken advantage of. And it's also a very tough thing to talk about with the employer because culturally, we've been raised to be very humble and to not put ourselves forward or to not demand more than what we're given. So it's a very tough space in terms of appreciating what different types of employees bring. For Pacific peoples, we're often asked to carry the burden of a lot of cultural labour, unorthodox types of skills that workplaces appreciate and workplaces expect and need, but they seem to be valued less. So I think if we transform the way that we think about skills, we think about what Pacific peoples are worth in terms of what they bring to workplaces, then we can go about addressing and closing that pay gap. I think the inquiry is absolutely crucial and necessary at this point in time. It always has been, but especially now where we're seeing, due largely to the pandemic, a lot of our youth are having to forego their education, having to leave school in order to take up work to help support their families. And that's a result of not only rising costs of living, but inadequate wages that our people are being paid. It's a serious impact on their future and their ability to provide not only for themselves, but their own families. So it's important for our kids, for our children, that we take action now. I think one of the most important systemic changes that we need to see is pay transparency legislation, where we can actually identify gaps within workplaces between employees that are Pacific and non-Pacific, and also along gender lines as well. Also to have accountability mechanisms for employers who aren't paying their employees equally along the lines of race and gender. So having that be put on the table and being championed by the Human Rights Commission and other key stakeholders will be incredibly important to addressing and closing the pay gap. Money in general is very difficult to talk about, and then when you add race, which is also an extremely difficult and sensitive issue, it triggers a lot of feelings and sensitivities, especially among Pākehā, who don't want to be seen as racist. But it's important that we confront these institutional and personal biases that employers may have towards Pacific and other minority communities, because that does exist and it's important to talk about it. So normalising those sorts of conversations is really crucial. I think it's absolutely essential for allies in unions and workplaces to come forward, because the Pacific pay gap impacts us all. When we're all not treated equally, it's not a happy workplace where we're all able to perform our best and do our best work. I strongly encourage all Pacific workers in construction, manufacturing and health to get involved with the inquiry, to engage with the surveys and the talanoa sessions that are going on. It is scary to speak up, but it's absolutely necessary if we're going to move forward as a community, and it's absolutely essential for the future of our youth.